Thanks for joining us on Moving Forward. This program today is going to be discussing resilience. Increased resilience is being shown to help vulnerable people, organizations, and systems survive and even thrive amid unforeseeable disruptions that our modern world is hurling at us. One avenue that promotes resilience is the growing interfaith activist movement. And we're very grateful to have three guests with us today. First, Erin Toolis is a graduate student in social psychology and an interfaith activist. And Sean Rose is an interfaith activist and educator here from London. He's just arrived. And we're also very honored to have with us Dr. Nancy Chen. She's a medical anthropologist and the author of numerous books. And she's currently co-editing a book on biosecurity and vulnerability. And she's going to be discussing resilience. So let's start with a short piece about the Interfaith Youth Corps and the need for that.
The voices of religious intolerance are growing louder every day. They seek to divide us from one another. Muslim from Jew, Christian from Buddhist, Hindu from secular humanist. Historically, voices of unity have risen above the chorus of bigotry. Voices like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Mahatma Gandhi. But today, intolerance is on the march again. We need new interfaith leaders to speak up against the divisions growing wider in America each day. Are you ready to stand up for what's right? Led by founder Eboo Patel, IFYC inspires young leaders of different faiths to work together to improve their communities and serve others. This movement is growing on college campuses nationwide, and IFYC's interfaith leaders are on the front lines. With your help, the forces of inclusion in America will prevail again. Speak up by joining the Interfaith Youth Corps at ifyc.org.
Erin and Sean, can you talk to us a little bit about religious literacy and what that means?
Yeah, I think for me, religious and cultural literacy is all about having an understanding of the people around us in our society. I think sometimes I talk to people and they say, oh, why is religious literacy, cultural literacy important? And they say, you know, I'm from this community. Everyone I know is from this same community. Why do I need to learn and understand about other communities? And I think when I look around society in London, where I'm from, in Santa Cruz, in California, in the States, I see a real diversity of religious backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, ethnicities. And I think for me, having literacy, having some understanding of those different backgrounds is really the foundation for more resilient communities and a more resilient society.
So it gives us kind of an ability to have sympathy and understanding for difference and people's backgrounds.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, just that because the U.S. is the most religiously diverse country and also happens to be one of the most religiously illiterate countries, it just kind of shows how important it is for us to be educated about that diversity because, you know, we live together, and so it's important just to know what our neighbors, you know, where our neighbors are coming from and to know about their backgrounds.
Right, that seems to be a huge problem in the United States. I think it also is a result of people not traveling very much. People in the United States tend to be, you know, not big travelers, worldwide travelers. And that can, I think it really can, you know, keep people from learning more about that. Maybe we could show this short piece on Understanding Prejudice, which is an excellent group that is online. It's understandingprejudice.org, and it illustrates the need for addressing these in our schools and communities.
In school, this girl called me an illegal immigrant, and I asked her why I was an illegal immigrant, and she says because I was black. I just told her that just because I'm black, it doesn't have to necessarily mean that I'm an illegal immigrant. Well, I felt a bit angry and just felt angry and upset.
It was a real bad incident when my scarf was pulled off, and it was pulled off for a joke, but I think it was a bad situation because it was done because someone wanted to do it for fun. I've my headscarf on, it makes me feel like I'm an individual, and I wear it for a purpose, for my religion, And when it was pulled off, I just felt like, why would someone do something like that to you, just for the fun of it? I'd ask them why they did it and ask them whether they'd like it if I did it to them, and would they think twice if they did it again. So would they not judge someone because they wear a scarf and think they're different, and whether they'd do it to anyone else.
She said that, oh, look at you, like, look at your skin colour and you're so dark and stuff, and I felt offended. I felt really upset and lonely. Yeah, she was one of my friends. She was white, basically. But like, I didn't realise that she was being horrible to me. But then like later on I realised she was.
As we were getting off, me and another girl, one of her friends shouted to these people, a group of 10 people, get them, they're Jewish. So I sort of took it as a jokey way. I didn't realise that they actually would, you know, try and attack us. But they said they had like masks on, and like half covering their face. It was quite like, you know, the Ku Klux Klan. It looked like one of them. So I was quite scared. But and they came very close. They were quite close, and they were saying all stuff like you Jew, and oh my, I can't believe you're Jewish.
Obviously, I was feeling sad. I was feeling a bit depressed as well, and for the first time in my life, I was feeling a bit ashamed to be black. And I don't think anyone, you know, because I'm proud of my heritage and stuff, I don't think anyone should. Nobody has the right to take that away from you. Nobody should make you feel inferior in your own skin.
So how do we start to address some of these prejudices? I mean, we could open it up, you know, to Nancy as well in terms of resilience, but I mean, religious literacy obviously would play a part in this.
Yeah, I think the first thing that comes to mind, firstly, when I watch really challenging clips like that, it brings me back to one of the programs that I work on in London, which is all about giving people opportunities to meet and learn from people from different backgrounds. It's called Encountering Faiths and Beliefs. And we bring guest speakers, trained guest speakers, into schools, public and private schools, to share their own personal narrative, their personal story, and to answer students' questions. A really simple model, but I've seen in the past couple of years how transformative that can be. I was facilitating a session in a public high school a few months ago, and it was myself presenting as a Christian alongside a Muslim and a Jewish person. And we finished the hour-long session that we had. And some of the students came up to us at the end and said, oh, thanks so much. I never knew before that Muslims and Jews could be friends. And I just thought that was such a powerful thing for a young person to come and say, not least because the Muslim and Jewish person, Suhail and Hannah, hadn't said anything about religious diversity or how they felt about other communities. The students had picked up on the way they were interacting together, the way that Hannah poured a glass of water for Suhail, or Suhail gave Hannah a tissue when she had a runny nose. And actually giving young people that opportunity to see people from different backgrounds, to interact with them, to ask them questions in a safe space, can be really transformative.
Talk a little bit about storytelling and narrative, because clearly these young people were sharing their heartfelt feelings and things from their own life and their experience. How powerful that can be in terms of helping us all understand where different kids are coming from.
Yeah, and I definitely think that that's what got me involved in the interfaith movement to begin with. I mean, at the very end of that clip, you saw that young man talk about how he really changed the story by first talking about a kind of negative experience in terms of how others perceived him, and then talking about his pride and his identity.
Right.
And I think that is the power of this movement and about interfaith collaboration, is that we transform those stories of narratives from conflict and violence into showing why that mobilizes each of us, and why that's a source of pride, why that's a source of energy in terms of being engaged in our communities and what we do in the world, and seeing how that's meaningful in the lives of the people around us, so that it isn't just an abstract kind of theological debate, but it's actually something that is embodied and that empowers all of us. And I think that experience of being able to tell our stories, which is very unique to everyone, is what got me excited about doing it, because I never knew before I got involved in interfaith work that I could really talk to other people about that. and that I could listen to other people, and that it was okay to ask questions. And so that was really empowering.
Yeah, because the interfaith movement also clearly would involve atheists as well. So it's kind of like, there's so much we could learn from one another. Why do you think that? Why did this, what in your life, made that happen? And I think it feeds into the idea of resiliency, which I think, if you could help us understand that term a little bit more.
Sure. Well, this is a term that actually, I think, gained some currency initially in the 1970s. It was originally about ecology. But what happened in the 1980s and 1990s is that psychologists began to recognize this important skill, not just for the environment, but really for humans and communities in terms of being able to adapt to social change, adapt to environmental changes. And more recently now, I think in 2005, there was I think I might have told you, there was an article by Harvard Business Review that actually talked about it's not so much your education, it's not so much your class, but it's actually the amount of resiliency a person might have that might be invaluable. But I did want to just briefly respond to what Erin was pointing out about storytelling. That storytelling is a very important element of, I think, resiliency, the ability to not only speak truth to one's experience, but also to be heard. That element of being heard by others contributes both to the power of a story, but also to the ability to develop resilience.
So just to define it, I mean, resilience sounds like, you're going to be tough, or you're going to be able to, but it's not like being desensitized in a way.
Right. I think there's a tendency to presume that resiliency means that one is going to be strong forever. But in fact, I think resiliency is about the recognition that there are going to be moments of weakness, there are going to be moments of failure, there are going to be moments where things don't work out the way one would ideally hope for. And so despite of such adversity or difficulties and difference, that it's possible to not so much bounce back, but to be able to recuperate a sense of self, a sense of community, a sense of belonging. I think these are the ways in which I think resilience overlaps significantly with the interfaith movement.
Yeah, as I was noticing when I was looking at the information on resilience, that it talks about how to be rejected is actually a good thing, because then you can learn from this, and the more that you can learn from this particular rejection, or in any level in life, that we can be able to be more successful, or just be able to just be more successful in life in general. Just an interesting
it's a really interesting concept, because I think that in the business world especially, or at least in capitalism, we're told you have to be successful, you have to work hard, and if you do, then everything will be fine. But the reality is that the majority of any industry, any profession, any school experience is often hard work, entails often having to go back and try again, and failure. And so rather than simply saying, well, everything's a failure, to realize that we can actually learn from our mistakes. We can also learn to how to not so much overcome, but how to engage with the process, rather than simply focusing on the end goal of being successful.
Right.
Yeah.
And we were going to show that image of crisis and opportunity together, and I think that's an interesting one, because while the symbol in Chinese calligraphy is one of for crisis, it includes the idea of opportunity.
Right.
So that in that moment of difficulty, that a door opens. In a sense.
Yeah, and actually a saying that goes with that character, the word in Chinese for crisis is weiji, which includes the word for danger and opportunity. But in Chinese, the saying is weiji shizhuanji, which is kind of a rhyme. But it means in a crisis, it's also a pivot point. It's an opportunity to be able to change things around, to turn things around. So literally, it's not so much that you can recuperate everything, but that you can at least transform, used as a transformative opportunity.
Yeah, and I'd like to make sure we talk about activism that is so much a big part of the interfaith movement, because to me that's teaching how to do service, and the joy that we can all get from performing service is so vital, I think, for all of us, especially given some of these tragedies that have been going on and things that are so disheartening, that we can to see a bigger picture and to see people in need and helping people in need. Do you want to talk a little about your experience in Africa?
Sure. And so the very first clip that was showed, it was about the Interfaith Youth Corps. And so through the Interfaith Youth Corps, I did a program called the Faith Act Fellowship, in which it was and Sean actually was a part of it as well. And so we were 30 young people chosen for this Interfaith Fellowship that worked together to try to make progress on the Millennium Development Goals through interfaith action. And so what we kind of learned through that experience is just how important it is to act with one another, and because it's such a unifying force in all religions and non-religious traditions as well, to kind of focus on that common good. And so what we did, my experience specifically, was to travel to Mali to work with a local program called Project Muso Ladamunin, which means Project for the Empowered Woman. And so they were working in Mali, where malaria is a huge problem, and there are a lot of preventable deaths that happen there because of it. And they try to combat malaria with 3 different ways: through microfinance, through adult education, and through community health care. And the kind of key to that is empowering women, because they recognize that women are really the ones that are going to save the lives in their community, because they're really rooted at the center of the family. And so that by training women to go out into their community and identify the early symptoms of malaria and take them to a clinic, that they can really prevent a lot of deaths. And one of the most striking women that I met through this program, her name was Ma Sise, and she was one of the community healthcare workers, one of the early women who had been trained in this program. And she was telling her story of faith. And so Mali is a predominantly Muslim country, and she was Muslim, and she was speaking about the power of her faith and why that motivated her to act. Because, we asked her, how do you go out in your community every day where you're surrounded by, just kind of a sense of hopelessness? There's just so much tragedy in your community, and what motivates you to keep going out there and be so energetic about helping those in your community? And she said, I'm on a personal jihad to save lives. And that was just an incredibly powerful experience for us to hear her say that, and to take a term that a lot of us have really negative associations with, and to hear her say that her faith, and to her the ultimate service to God is to go out and save lives from malaria, and that was what kept her going. And so that was just a really, really powerful experience for me, and I think everybody who was there, learning from these women, to see what a force for good faith can be.
And I think also, for me, the power of interfaith action rather than interfaith dialogue or conversation is that, for me, it really flips on its head that traditional model of people, often religious leaders, typically men, or more men than women, having a conversation or having a dialogue or crafting a statement about something, which absolutely has its value. But actually, interfaith action or interfaith service is about going the other way around, actually starting by doing something really practical, building a relationship with the people around you, and then that as the foundation for the conversation. I heard it explained once as being hands to hearts to heads. So doing something practical together, serving together, having that relationship, having that bond with those you serve with, and then having the foundation to say, actually, I've always wanted to ask you about what that word jihad means, or I've always wanted to know more about the community you're from. Can you answer these questions?
Tell us more about resilience, or is there anything else that you'd like to add about this? We have a little video at the end.
Thinking about this topic, this has been something I've been very interested in, not just of recent, but not after Katrina and not after these different disasters, but it was really sparked by when I first went to China in the 1980s, and this was in the post-Mao period. People were just starting to become entrepreneurial, but they still had to kind of work through and process the trauma that they had experienced during the Cultural Revolution. So I was very much struck by the stories that I was told. I felt traumatized by the stories, but the question that I kept on asking was, how did these people survive? How did my friends, my colleagues, my students, how did their families manage to get through? And so I think it's an incredible skill that they've managed to think through, go through the experience, but also use their stories as a way to think through and process what they could learn from those experiences as well.
How did they? I mean, can you share that?
Well, you know, one short story was a friend who was such a great cook. He was a great chef, and I asked him, how did you learn to cook so well? He actually said, well, it wasn't from my parents. I said, well, how did you? And he said, well, after his father came out of jail from being in prison for 10 years, he lost the desire to eat. So he actually learned to cook and make a different dish every day because he wanted his father to enjoy food again. And so, you know, it's those little stories of things that you do, not just of dialogue, but really doing something that he made a transformation, not just in his own ability to cook, but really to be able to relate to his father. Words, you know, really couldn't relate to
because they'd been
the
separated
experience.
for how long?
For over 15 years. He was in jail for 10 years, and then
because there was that whole generation where their families were torn.
Right, and the sent down youth. So teenagers or people in college.
What is sent down youth? What is that?
These were mostly urban youth that were sent to rural areas to do hard labor for the most part. So by the time his father got out of prison, he was already not in Beijing. He was actually in the countryside. So they didn't see each other for the majority of his childhood years. So one of the ways in which he could relate back to his father was through the language of food and really to show his love. So I think of resilience as a very powerful opportunity, not just a tool, but really an opportunity to rethink the experiences one goes through and moving forward.
Can you share with us the story about the Sikh community that you worked with?
Yeah, absolutely. So as Erin mentioned, we were both on this Faiths Act fellowship together, and as a Christian, I was placed at a Sikh Ethos Service Centre in Birmingham, in the north of England, or north of London. And for me, it was really the first time that I had had such an immersive experience of working and living alongside a community that in many ways was very different from mine. But the more I got to know Pritpal, who was the person I was working with, and her community, the more I started to see these values of service, which I had grown up with as a Christian, being echoed and mirrored in Pritpal's life and in her community. And there's a very strong concept of seva, or selfless service, in the Sikh tradition and in the Hindu tradition as well. And the Gurdwara, the Sikh place of worship where we were based, serves 35,000 free.
So first of all, Sikhs are Hindus, or a kind of Hindu.
So Sikh and Hindu communities have some shared heritage, but they see themselves as being distinct traditions.
Right, because they're the one, you know, people often mistake them for being Muslim because of the turban.
Right. So in a similar way that you know, Christians and Jewish communities have similar roots, but have very distinct communities. So Sikh and Hindu communities have some shared heritage, but see themselves as very distinct communities. Okay. But the particular service where the centre where I was working, as I say, served 35,000 free vegetarian meals to the local community every single week. It was completely volunteer run. Everyone in the community, from the young children to 70 and 80-year-old women and men, would be working and serving in this community because that was just a key part of their faith. And I think for me, as someone who had always seen the value of service, but had sometimes struggled to put it into practice in my own community, this was just such an inspiration to see actually these values of selfless service being put into practice in such a practical and such a tangible way.
I know that you've written on food and medicine, and food as medicine, and I love also thinking about you know, how important food can be as a joiner, as a way to cross-culturally connect people, because we see that understanding individuals' religion is really important, but it could also be through the food, and that could be like the first part, which, you know, I mean, my first trip to London was in 1968. They had no ethnic food at all. The food was pretty bad. And now, I mean, we have so many different ethnic groups that they have so many different kinds of food opportunities. And now it's a culinary wonder.
I actually, speaking from my own experience, I grew up in Louisiana in the American South, and so my parents are Buddhist, and so one of the ways in which my mom told me, she said, you have to, I think what set me on the road to being an anthropologist was she said, if you want to understand American culture, you have to go to its churches. So she actually kind of made me go with a different friend each weekend, like Saturday or Sunday, to go to a temple or to a church. Mostly churches, because it was predominantly Christian. But even within Christianity, there's so many different types of Christians, and so I got to learn about them. But oftentimes they would come to our house because we were the only non-Christians in the neighborhood. And I remember thinking, oh no, they're trying to proselytize. But my mother was very open, and she would often serve them. Food that whatever she was making at home that day, often it would be wontons. And so she would basically invite them into the house, let them get to know them. And I think that was one of the first lessons I ever got about interfaith dialogue was really just over food.
Oh, that's great. Well, we only have a few more seconds to wrap up. Is there any other final comments anybody wants to make? We're going to show a little video at the end about interfaith movement, but.
I think something I'd just love to mention is a specific project which viewers might want to get involved in. It's a campaign called Ravel Unravel, and it's coming out of what you said earlier, Anne, about having spaces to have these kinds of conversations.
Thank you so much for joining us on Moving Forward. And make sure to let us know if you come up with ideas for moving forward to contact Media Watch. Thanks.
Open your eyes up, people, and take a good look around. Catch the tears filling up all those cracks in the ground. Turn off your televisions, leave your picture-perfect neighborhoods. A lot of folks out there ain't doing so good. Too many of us left out in the cold. No invitations given, no welcome mats unrolled, but you can be the change you want to see, and be the hope to those whose lives are far from easy. Reach out and lend a hand, share everything you can, and be the change.